Let there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation. Let there be peace and love. Let there be perfection throughout all creation. And love and perfection. Let there be throughout all creation. And love, oh God. Let there be perfection. Let there be peace and love and perfection throughout all creation, oh God. Heard was a composition of mine, Spirits, which I actually wrote while working on a piece called Prophetica and Oratorio with director Charlotte Brathwaite and artist Abigail DeVille. we were working on this oratorio at that time, and the same year I was writing a piece for the American Composers Orchestra, which I called Sanctum, and that was a artistic response to police brutality, which I had voices of Marlene Pinnock from Los Angeles, as well as voices from Ferguson after the killing of Mike Brown. So I had all these things going on in my mind, and this piece was part of Prophetica, but I ended up, I include this on my live performances as I, in the spirit of how Billie Holiday would include Strange Fruit in her performances. And after I wrote Sanctum, the orchestra piece that I mentioned, I got a commission I got a call from Lee, who's the co-founder of the Dream Unfinished, an activist orchestra. And she asked me if I was interested in writing a piece for chorus and orchestra that would be a dedication to Sandra Bland, who had recently been found dead in a jail cell in Texas. So I really felt moved to do this project. And one of the first things we talked about was, if it's chorus, what would I like to do with text? Do I want to find a poem that pre-existed from the past, or are there any poets that I'm dying to work with? So the first person I thought about, co-founder of the Dark Room Collective, wonderful poet Sharon Strange. We had been in conversation a lot about these sort of issues that were going on through social media. We'd been in conversation. So I reached out to her and she was interested, and what followed was a several-month collaboration discussing the intention of this piece and sharing different creative process. And just at the right moment, I met someone who I had been a fan of her music, but I hadn't met her in person yet, and that's Helga Davis, musician and performance artist. And I met her at a fundraiser for the fundraiser. I was playing music of Nina Simone, and we spoke, and then I was talking with Lee, and so I asked Helga if she was interested in working on this piece, and so at this moment that I love to think about, the ultimate collaborative moment, Sharon, Helga, and I got together at a piano, and we did improvisations on the draft of the poetry that Sharon had, and we created together. Helga and I created different musical ideas, and so from the core of these ideas and discussions that we all had together, that became the core for this piece called Yet Unheard. So then I sat aside from that and I wrote a piece. I wrote the piece for chorus and for orchestra and for Helga Davis. So that's the piece Yet Unheard that I want to share with you in a little bit. But just want to mention this was 2016 that we had the premiere in New York. And at that premiere, one of the speakers was the wonderful composer and pianist Vijay Iyer. And following that performance, he gave a talk, but he was curating that the following year for the Hyde Music Festival. So he invited us to do a chamber version of the same piece. So I made a chamber version of the full piece, and it was performed by the International Contemporary Ensemble and directed by Stephen Schick. So that happened in Ojai in 2017. So since then, we've done a number of performances, either the full version or the shorter version. The full version or the chamber. And so what I want to do before we get into listening to it is just to have a conversation. So I'd like to introduce Sharon Strange and Helga Davis so we can have a conversation.
Hi, Courtney.
Hey.
Hi, Sharon. So good to see everyone.
Yeah, great to see both of you.
Yeah, so we're all joining from different cities. This is how we're all doing right now. We're all just meeting over video and sharing. So Sharon is in Atlanta and Helga is in New York, and I'm here in New Orleans. And I just wanted to ask each of you if you want to share a bit. I gave the background of this piece we did, Yet Unheard, dedicated to Sandra Bland. What were some of the reasons that you decided to do this project, and also what's some things you would like to share about the process of working on it?
I can start. Is that okay, Sharon?
Yeah, sure.
It's interesting, Courtney, because my reason for wanting to work on the piece have everything to do, my reasons for wanting to work on the piece have everything to do with what's happening right now. I'm in New York, I'm in Harlem, where there have been some protests, where I've been listening to gunfire for a lot of the day. And I feel like if we could just go outside and sing this piece of music right now, like if we could go out right now and play it, that we would have a container for the rage and the disappointment and the hope that things can be better. And that's a thing that really attracted me to working on this piece. The other thing that was very powerful about it is that the first time that we performed it was on the anniversary of Sandra Bland's death.
Yeah.
And that I would somehow be called to do that work on that day was also very, 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 very powerful. And it is what we do, it is what we bring, and that what we really make with our work are containers for all kinds of feelings, for all kinds of experiences, for all kinds of people who have things that need to be expressed. And I really, I felt this about the piece when we started it. I knew that I was going to be part of something that that perhaps in my lifetime we would never, there would always be a need for it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to our 200 city tour.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a piece that is needed right now. So good evening to everyone. And I am smiling even as I'm hurting so much inside, because I know that what we have is a very special and a very needed piece of medicine for the time that we're in.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me get that out, Sharon.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that in some ways you a preface for what I wanted to say. You ended with the words medicine, and I was thinking about healing. And I remember when I wrote the piece, for a long time it didn't have the title that it has now. And I remember only towards the end did Courtney and I talk about the title. And I said I wanted to title it Yet Unheard. And I remember when Courtney invited me to write the text for the piece, that I felt that this was something big that I had to add my voice to, but more importantly, that I had to add Sandra Bland's voice to. And so Yet Unheard was, it sort of riffs off of Dr. King's famous quote, and everyone's throwing that quote around right now. He said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." And I thought, so we've been trying to be heard for so long in this country. And Sandra Bland was trying to be heard. And Sandra Bland, before she was murdered, was doing these podcasts called Sandy Speaks. And so for me, it was important to have her speak in the piece. So I just remembered, that notion when you thought about medicine and I thought about healing. I thought we need a piece that is somehow healing, but part of the healing has to be everyone hearing each other, us listening to each other. And Sandra Bland was not listened to. That police officer didn't listen to her. This society didn't listen to her. There's so many of us who aren't being listened to, who are the horrific victims of this violence, and we are the horrific witnesses to this violence. And so I felt like this was a piece where we were going to create some, and again, your language is so, I think, key, Helga, a container. And I knew about Courtney's work and how powerful Courtney's music is, and just I knew that that would be a container, and that if I could put those words in there, those words that, you know, the imagined speaking of Sandra Bland from beyond, you know, her death, speaking to us, and then other voices that I could bring into the piece. So the piece also incorporates the voices of Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter movement, and Angela Davis, whom we all know is iconic, you know, freedom fighter, who's still fighting, you know, with us. And so, and then there was the sense of a communal voice, right, that enters into the piece. So all of these voices, all of this speaking would be a part of that healing, and that Courtney's music and your voice, Helga, would be the container for that. So, yeah.
You know, this is the only piece I've caught the spirit while performing piano in a lot of different settings at different times. It's not something that, you know, it's one of those things where you can't like summon it. Well, I shouldn't say you can't. It's happened at different times, but this is the only time where notating a piece where I feel like that happened, where I just kind of disappear into a moment. I love to talk about the moments of us together, but sometimes I think about that, the moments after all the months of what we did together and the things we explored. And there's ways that each of you pushed me to hear things differently, because where the poetry went, I had to go emotionally, because you went to some really deep places, and the kind of questions that came up and the things I had to try to imagine from the possible inside mind of Sandra Bland, also to imagine from the mind of the police officer, or also the community around her, and just to like all the things that the poetry forced me to do that were difficult, but that were also helped me, just caused me to grow musically. And the same with working with Helga, just all the things that were possible musically. Like, I know you teach me about. Anyway, but I know that Helga could do like she's such a fun artist. So yeah. I just thinking musically all the things that were possible. So working with both of you just had me grow in a different way. So by the time I got in this room by myself and I was writing, I just remember how I went into some sort of a zone. I feel like I got in the spirit with it. And then we had the premiere, and there was all the excitement of it. And it wasn't until weeks later that I had a couple of weeks where there was nothing but nightmares. And so it was like it was the exhilaration of a performance, like any kind of performance, but it wasn't any kind of performance or any kind of piece or experience. And so I think I remember looking back at that, and I guess I don't know. And y'all could ask the questions too. I just have a question. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. We do this work. Speaking of work being a container, I guess the thing that comes up is when you're being a container or you're being a vessel for something. If either of you want to speak on that, and also just when you feel like a work is something that you're called to do, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily enjoyable or fun. Sometimes, you know, like depending on what it is, but it's something that you have to do. But how do we as artists deal with having like this thing that we have to do, but also we're existing in the world with the same fears. I mean, it could happen to any of us, and at any moment, and that's like very clear while working on this as three Black women, and just like a lot in common with Sandra Bland. So yeah, I don't know if you want to speak on any of those things, like being a vessel and managing.
Well, I think one of the things that's really important, and it's just a lesson for any person, when you do a thing that feels big and important in this way, that you take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. After our performance with The Dream Unfinished, I was really fortunate. A friend and mentor, Craig Harris, was in the audience that night, and he literally put my coat on me and put me in a car. Mm. And when we got in the car, I put my head on him and I just wept. Mm. And he knew to do that. Mm. He knew. Mm. The other piece of this is that we make this piece in community, so that your conductor the conductor is such an important role in this, because it is the conductor who also serves as a kind of vessel for the orchestra, for when the orchestra doesn't have language to navigate what it is that they feel. Every time we have performed this piece, it has done something to the orchestra as well. And it isn't necessarily our work or our responsibility or a thing that we can do while we're having to make the work to take care of what it is that they need. So in that way, the conductor also becomes hugely important in helping to hold that part of the energy that also works on the people who make the piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I want to say about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess in terms of, I know that's pretty heavy, Courtney. I guess I don't often sit back and think, oh, I'm the vessel, but I do feel like I'm in some way doing what's necessary, maybe just to hold my little spot in the universe, It's just somehow that's what I've shown up to do, and I don't know how or why, but I do it, and I take any opportunity to collaborate. I love being able to collaborate because, in a lot of ways, what Helga was just talking about, that kind of synergy that's happening around work that is in process within a community feels very vital. It feels very much a part of what is necessary in my life. And the writer's work can be pretty solitary. So that's why I jumped at the chance to collaborate with you and Helga on this piece, because again, the subject matter here, and maybe just the subject matter of art, generally speaking, is larger than any of us. And that's always brought home again and again to me when I collaborate with others. So it just means like, you hold your space in it. So you're a vessel, I'm a vessel, Helga's a vessel. We're all part of this larger thing that's a vessel too. And it's just like, you bring that energy and you hold that place in it, and it transforms you, and you get to transform other people. And that seems to me to be the point of all of this, to be the point of any of it.
I want to hear the piece now.
Okay. So we're gonna, and by the way, for those listening, we'll, after the piece, we'll have a moment. If you have any questions for us, you can add it to the chat, add it to the chat, and then we'll be able to converse with you a bit. So here's Yet Unheard with the La Jolla. So this is 2018 La Jolla Symphony and Chorus, conducted by Stephen Schick, featuring Helga Davis.
Not just in that moment, but with torturous delay. I sat 3 days in a cell, a cocoon of despair. My head bursting, my questions unanswered, my challenge criminally removed, my anger no match for them as they robbed me of and tried to kill my dignity too. But you are my enemies, my witnesses, beyond all glaring disregard, all contempt for truth. Don't relinquish our lives to erasure by brutes.
I just feel so proud, of the work that we have done with this piece. And it is a medicine that is needed now. And we need to be doing this work, this piece now.
Yes. I agree. And thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And we need to keep, to Helga's point, we need to keep the healing and the medicine moving forward and moving throughout the society.
And making our containers.
Mm.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Helga.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes.
And thank you to Kate and to Alex as well. And thanks to Hyde Park Jazz Festival for opening a space for us to engage with others. We thank you all for joining in.
Yes.